So this is going to be a brief video going out to everyone who's doing Certificate 4 in youth work, the Tuesday night class, or perhaps you're from another class and this is your recording as well. Going out this week is 2 recordings, a longer one with all the skills around the role play. I do need to give you some instructions around the assessment, hoping that you watch this so that everyone who's enrolled will get that. I'm sure you watched the recordings from classes. But let me just walk you through what's required of you around the assessments. We are currently in week 2. There are 3 weeks put aside. Tonight we had learners do task 2, both part A and some did part B as well. So let me just walk us through this at the moment. Before we start, we'll do acknowledgement to country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we work, study and live, and pay our respect to elders past, present and future. We celebrate the stories, culture and traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders of all communities who also work and live on this land. And I'd like to extend this out to all of our Haida learners who are watching the recording or anyone that attends our classes. So the unit we are on is quite sensitive. It's got some content in there that sits around young people who may be experiencing complex PTSD. I want you to go gently into this space. We talk about that when we're in our classes. But this is just a short reminder. As a worker, as a frontline worker and first responder, in most times you're working with very vulnerable target group and you need to look after yourself as well. There is support if there's any content whatsoever that is triggering for you or you think is triggering for any of your clients or your peers in class, then 13, 11, 14, Lifeline is 24/7. They're all trained counsellors and very used to students giving them a call, from high school students, anyone over the age of 12, all the way through to people who are studying like you are, or into tertiary, people who are doing traineeships and apprenticeships. The workload and the study load can be challenging because it's all time management. You're throwing it on top of your already busy lives. But when you're studying something like Certificate 4, in youth work, the content and our scenarios are simulating what happens in our day-to-day, and some days are hard, and this is the work that you're going into. So we sit in classes and we unpack all those micro skills. This brief recording is going to be watched, I hope, with the other recording where you'll see 5 learners actually demonstrate the practitioner skills, and all the others who were in class provided the peer review and the support, and they gave the feedback to the learners. So I want to thank those learners that jumped in, and it isn't for everyone to do their role plays in classes, but we really appreciate it. And anyone that's attending classes or watching the recordings is seeing people do that in real time. Now, it will be different for you if you're not doing your role plays in classes, because 1, it won't be assessor-led and all the unpacking and debriefing as part of that extra assessment work that I do. And 2, because they're working with someone who's coaching them. And my assessment is very different in class. Assessor-led and in real time is different to your instructions in your assessment portal. So follow the instructions. That is your guide if you are not doing your role plays in classes. So we vary things according to the simulated workplace environment. When you're doing your recording, you have a full suite of resources in Discord and in the announcements, where it tells you all the do's and don'ts about any of the role plays that you record on your own. When you're in classes, you've got a facilitator there, an assessor there, who's going to coach and guide you and turn that role play into a learning moment for everybody that's in class in real time. So the classes are experiential and interactive, whereas the role plays that you record on your own that do not require an assessor there follow the instructions that you have in your portal exactly. So when it says a simulated workplace environment, make sure that your background looks like your workplace. When it says that you must present as a worker, that means you're dressed as a worker, what a youth worker would look like if they're going to work. So it's very important that you duplicate it. You need to say your full name that you have as your enrolment name with HADA. You need to show ID or quote your student ID number with HADA. We're not interested in your private details. It needs to be your photo ID or you give your HADA ID number. So some learners have found it really helpful to just print that out and they show that on the screen, and then they have that for at the beginning of every role play rather than state that. Know that your role play, when you go in, you must state what the unit code is, a brief summary around the scenario that you're about to do, and you introduce the people that you're doing the role play with. I have so-and-so here with me today, and they're going to play the role of. So for this one, we're talking about task 2, and task 2 was what was going to be done in classes tonight, and you'll see that happen. But it will say, you know, this is about a young person who's 16. And their name is Dario. And there are 2 parts to this role play. The first part is the intake, the assessment, the priority of needs, the risk assessment around the young person, engaging with them, using all those micro skills. And then the second part of this is seeing the young person, Dario, 2 days later. So 2 of the learners tonight are going to do both parts. And the other 3 learners are going to do the first part, the intake and the assessment. Some people will come back next week in week 3 and finish off that task 2. And then some people will be ready to jump in and do task 3. And again, they're small role plays. So this unit has task 1, which is a quiz, task 2, which has role plays, which is what you're going to see in our recording tonight. It's what we did live tonight. And then, of course, week 3, we will do task 3 and the role plays there. And if anyone would like to do the second part of their task 2, we will do that. How do you find the information about what to do for a role play? You go into your porthole, you open up the task, you read through everything, and you look for the instructions. It'll give you a link that takes you into, moving this, takes you into a space that outlines it. I'm going to show you there is an error, and I'm recording this because I want to show you that hopefully by the time you get this recording, we have corrected that. But just in case you haven't, one of the learners kindly raised that for us tonight, and I want to thank them for that as well. We often ourselves do not know until it's some resource that we're pulling up for the next unit that we're working on. So as you can imagine, there's thousands of assessment tasks across all of the scope of what we have. And so we love your feedback and thank you to the learner that gave us that tonight. There's part of another scenario which somehow is just migrated in our Accelerate portal, but I'll show you what it is and I'll let you know that it's an error, and I'll also let you know which is the correct one as well, but I'll walk you through that in a moment. So the full unit overview for doing CHCYTH013 sits around communicate effectively with young people, respond to youth cultures and subcultures and young person's own development, and we need to be able to assess that. Work with the young person as the focus, which means it's person-centric or client-centric. They are in the middle and the center of everything we do. We collaborate with them. We encourage them to talk about what their needs are, and we try and guide them to find those resources and those people and those services. We will walk beside them as a youth worker. That's mostly what your role is. So sometimes we will do casework, but this isn't a casework. This one is intake assessment. You'll do your privacy and your confidentiality. You'll make sure you've got informed consent. You'll look at the priority of needs, and you'll use all your micro skills. But I'll take that over to you for watching with the second recording that comes out this week. And then, of course, you will critically reflect on your own practice and values. Now, I do that verbally in class tonight, but there's a spot in your portal where you must do your reflection piece, and that's the next part of that. Let me just take you over to that space, and I'd like to guide you there. Just in the portal now, around this unit that we're working on. So here we have, you can see here CHCYTH013, engage respectfully with young people. Task 2 of 3. That means that there are 3 assessment tasks. Task 1 is the quiz. Task 2 is what we're working on in week 2. That's where we are tonight. And that's what you're going to see. People will demonstrate that, because some people like doing their role plays in class. You've always got someone to play the role of the client, which that's a bonus, but not everyone's comfortable with the lights, camera, action sort of feeling. And some do get very nervous, and that's only natural. So there's other things that we do as well. We give that feedback immediately rather than you submit your work and that. So we offer all of that. This is not one that you require an assessor to be in. This is one you can manage yourself and do that. And it tells you who to put in there in that space. So let's have a look at the instructions, part A and part B. So part A is about getting to know the young person, and the session overview is to, talk to us about here. So it's got, you will play the role of First Access youth worker, Jovan Prasanna. So you will be meeting with a young person named Dario. Sorry, I've been talking all day and night. And you're going to talk with Dario about a confidential discussion. Sorry. I do apologise for that. I had a coughing fit in the middle of it all. So that's how you know this is totally real time. So let me walk you through this. So part A, you do intake assessment with Dario. Excuse me. And you click on here to get into your role play instructions. Let's have a look at that. Okay, not loving it while we're on Zoom. I'll circle back to that for you in a moment and show you where the error is. You'll need to go into your code of ethics, Child Safety Code of Conduct. Here are the policies and procedures in First Access, which is your website. So part of your instruction is to make sure that you go into the First Access site to get your instructions. It says the role play should be no more than 15 minutes, which means it can be no less than 10. When it says no more than 15, 3 to 5 will definitely get sent back. 7 to 10, maybe, if you've got all of the elements. It's complex, so you need the time to be able to do it. If you were in the workplace, you would have 45 minutes with this young person. So don't cut yourself short in your role plays, because you won't know what to do when you're actually one-on-one with a client. You'll think everything will be 10 or 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, you can get through it. That's why we have so many of them. So there's 2 parts to this. So you're actually with Dario for 30 minutes. That would be your ideal scenario. So make sure that you go into your policies and procedures. It says that you're going to need your video conferencing. So Zoom is very popular. Here we have the actual scenario. So we have Dario is 16, homeschooled his entire life, a deeply religious family. So there's some things there to look at that's their cultural diversity, and we don't yet know if that is an important part of what Dario is bringing into the space and what wants in his life. So it talks about at age 15, he was at breaking point, and then he realised he identified as part of the LGBTIQA plus community. And so his parents were closed to that because of their faith and lots of different reasons. So this is not uncommon for us to be working in this space as youth workers. So he left the family home as a young person, and he had found himself in a relationship mostly around that accommodation. Has quite a small worldview, and there's a lot of gaps, and that gets explored. So go through your instructions. That's an important part. So engage effectively. Yeah, so it's got their stage of development. So if he's had a sheltered life and he presents as a 16-year-old with you, we can't assume that you'll know certain things, or by the time you're 16 should, like a youth worker will never use that lens. That lens is trying to make sense of something without full information, or using a guide that people have, and that's their personal. When we step into this space, this is our professional training. You're getting a qualification to be a Cert 4 youth worker. This is frontline. This is where you will have that difference around your approach. It will be non-judgmental, non-sectorial, non-political, non-religious, regardless of what your personal views and values are. When we step into this space, we work completely within the guidelines, the scope of our role. If it says in your role that you are to talk about certain things, then you do. But if it is not in your position description, if it's not in your employment contract, if it is not in your policies and procedures, then you do not. So it's an easy thing to decide on. We all have our own views, but when we step into work, it's not opinion-based, it's evidence-based work that we do, and it's backed up by all of the micro skills that you need and all of the understanding around the mental health, the social, emotional, psychological well-being of young people when we're in that space. So you'll need to consider their culture, their development, any issues that they're presenting with that currently are impacting, which is why they come to a youth worker, their own perspective on things, which of course they will have, and then what is the youth culture and subculture and what exists around there, and consider that, research that, explore what that might be, different subcultures. So I'm fortunate that over the decades, I've been able to see lots of different subcultures emerge in that space. But in this case, for Dario wants to be connected to the LGBTQIA plus community, that subculture, because he's exploring what his sexual identity is, which of course was a very closed conversation within his family unit. It was a deal breaker. You know, he couldn't stay in the family unit while he had those conversations or had those beliefs. That didn't make Dario stop having those conversations and hold those beliefs. This is Dario trying to find out who he is and where he fits in. And as a youth worker, we will put options in front of him. What is the legal requirement around this? Dario is a 16-year-old boy. Look in your state and your territory on what other laws around that. So apply your appropriate communication strategies, which should include changing your communication or pivoting to address certain cultural sensitivities, your active listening or your micro skills, your questioning, which is who, what, how, when, where, and why. And then respecting the young person in terms of their needs, their responsibilities, and their rights. And then we will conduct ourselves with healthy professional boundaries. We'll be consistent in how we communicate with our client, because that's where the trust will be created. So if you want a young person to trust you, then work within your guidelines, you know, have a really good, healthy professional boundary. I can do these things. No, I cannot do those things. And here is why. And one of our learners tonight, it does explain that, you know, where they're challenging and it can seem like an imbalance of power, sorry. And so they're testing that boundary. And the youth worker who does that in their role play does it perfectly. So, you know, every time they test it, each person tonight just move them gently back to the center where they're regulated, where the highs are not too high or the lows are too low, just to find that consistent space, which is where they will go, well, I know what they're like as a worker. I can rely on that. I can trust that. And they will test it. And that's fine. That's a natural thing for someone to want to test it, especially when they're trying to take control of their lives and step into making choices. And we want them to have healthy choices and safe choices. So we demonstrate that and we model that exactly like that, so that they learn, no, I'm putting in a boundary. But it's not about authority. It's actually about, you know, I've got a boundary there and I can't do that. And here is why, rather than ignore it or confront. So always use strength-based feedback with your clients. Make sure that you ask the client, how do you think I went? I conduct that in class live, and I just say, what was it like sitting in the chair? How did that feel? So that the person who did the role play got that information. Part of that is in your written work. When you do these role plays on your own, you need to make sure that you have got feedback from the client. So every one of these things here is what you must have in your actual role play that you're going to do yourself. So what are we looking for? Exactly that. What do you need to do to prepare, fully understand the scenario that you're coming into? Get a feel for what that might be like in their story, but you're being assessed on how you engage, what things you consider, your non-verbal body language as well. Make sure that when you're recording that you and Dario, or the person that plays Dario, are both on the screen at all times. Now, you won't see that in our class recordings because of the way our Zoom is set up in cloud. However, I can see everybody the whole time, and it was assessor-led, which meant I was there and I could look at when everybody was sitting and when they were in silence, when they were listening, when they were talking, and so could every other learner that attended class tonight. So we were all able to see both people, the person who played Jovan and the person who played Dario. So, but when you're doing your role plays, we need to have both of you on the screen, and your person that plays Dario, they can't read from a script. Like, you've got to coach them, you've got to prepare them, you've got to say, listen, I want you to read this and I want you to get into character. So you pick someone who is 100% on your team, who will enjoy supporting you in that space. So it's important that you do work with that person. It is a sensitive topic, and while I might work with this day in, day out, and you might work with this as well as someone who works with this target group, it can be quite daunting for someone who plays the role for you, who isn't studying, who hasn't got that underpinning knowledge that you're growing and developing with each week. So be mindful of that. We can be triggered by something that we read. It doesn't have to actually be happening to us. It can be vicarious trauma, and it can be the smallest of things that can trigger not necessarily this story, but something that they may be sitting with and have not shared. So I want you to be observant, read the room. In the task 3, it actually goes into that further. It's about your observation and you as a youth worker in a space with 3 different people. So that's a group 1, and we require, you will require 3 other people plus yourself. Of course, in class, we'll have volunteers to do them. But if you're going to be playing the role of a client and it's in class next week, then please step in and offer to do that. You don't have to do your role play, but you can sit in the chair and know what it feels like when someone else is doing that. But if you're coming in, you need to be prepared and know what it is that you're doing for this scenario. The same as what we've just covered here with Dario. So let me just jump out of there and I'll stop sharing. See if I have a copy of the role play for us. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I do. I No, I don't. But I do want to say to you that there is an error, and the error is at the bottom of the document where it says to click on the link, which I had no luck with myself tonight. And that I may have successfully corrected the error or made it worse. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'll find out tomorrow. But where you see click on the role play instructions, see what I can do. It'll let me do this. Fingers crossed, and I think we're there. Beautiful. So it's showing the document slowly, but yeah, I think we're going to be able to see it if it's going to download for us. It does fight with Zoom in real time when we're recording and sharing a screen. Not sure if you can see this, but I did want to be able to show you. So for some reason, the screen has disappeared. I'm not sure how, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hoping that it will allow me to know if I'm just right out of it. Let's just see if it will let us back in again. And I think it might. Got one more shot. Yeah, I think we're there. Fabulous. All right, let me just make a little bit more room. Look, this isn't perfect, but you're going to see the document when you go into your own portal. What I wanted to do was show you the error more than anything. So the role play instructions were there already in your portal. As you scroll down, it's written and embedded into your portal, but it also gives you a link to click on. And this is the link that I've clicked on here. However, it gives you the first part of it, which is intake and assessment. And you'll see that played out in classes, in recordings. So this is about Dario and the first time you meet. It covers all the story. All of that is accurate. Then the second part is 2 days later in part B of task 2. So it's 2 role plays in this. And it's about Dario is 16 years of age, and so it's the same young person. And then you see him just in a follow-up. And there's a whole lot of other things that you're going to be talking about. Here is where the error is. For some reason, this role play has turned up in the task 2 and it doesn't belong. It actually belongs to a different unit that you do. For those of you that may have done it already, this is about advocacy, and this is not something that you should be doing. So I want to say thank you so much to our learner for raising that tonight. But this here, where it's got Michael Smart as supervisor and speaks to you about Clark, is not part of this. You can see anyway because it's got task 3 but it's task 3 in a completely different one. You're looking for anything that says task 2 because it is CHCYTH013, task 2, part A of the role play instructions, and you want part B of the role play instructions, also task 2. Ignore what's on the bottom of that page, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get rid of that. So as you scroll down, it does say that it's task 3, but it's a completely different unit and has nothing to do with this one. It is an error, and it's definitely an error at our end. So I'm pointing that out to you. I'm letting you know in your recording so you can do just the part A and the part B. Just the rest of it, though, I've let our team know, so I'm hoping we'll get that remedied for you as quickly as possible. So that's actually your task 2. That's the end of how we work in that space. You're going to see part A and part B, and then we'll have people next week who will do task 3. And that will require extras, and it will be about a group of young people who present as having different cultures and diversity, and it's about that collaboration and you being able to monitor and watch and pick up any nuances that might be there and working with them. So it's a great unit, this one. Very realistic, definitely part of our normal day-to-day as a youth worker, depending on the role that you're in. And you can go through many doors to work in the sector, but our young people, 12 to 24 years of age, which is what youth workers do, you'll find that they access employment, and they access housing, and they access residential care, and they have issues around sexuality. They have issues around substance misuse. They are in the court system. The one constant is that they're a young person and they're vulnerable, and whether they are an offender or the victim of that. So your work is with both. Regardless, we only work in that space of what happened to you and how can I come out of that place of service to help that young person deal with whatever it is that they're dealing with and needing the support from you to be able to make that happen. So this is part 1 with a couple of instructions around the role plays, which is great. But I also want you to be able to go into the second recording and watch some of our amazing learners who are doing their role play. So I'll close off this part one and please watch part two.